lot of this comes, we were talking about tolerance before, a lot of this comes to tolerance. The Christian faith says we should not tolerate evil. And, throwing homosexuals off of roofs or oppressing women that they can't drive, can't be educated, or must cover themselves in all but the niqab is what we would class as evil. None of it is good, yet we've tolerated it far too long to the point that it's become normalized and accepted.
But before we get into our conversation, my name is Eric Metaxas, and this channel exists to bring you a biblical perspective on today's news, culture, and hot button issues. If you're new here or not, welcome, and be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you are notified when new videos get posted. The Reverend Father Calvin Robinson is a political advisor, TV anchor, radio presenter, conservative commentator, and parish priest in London. And he is now my guest on the Eric Metaxas Show. Father Calvin Robinson, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Eric. It's great to be back. How are you?
I'm swell. Do you have that word over there in England? Do you say, gee, I'm swell? No. Gosh, no, I'm swell. I know you never did. We had it here for a number of decades. I think from the 20s, roughly into the 60s, people would say I'm swell. But I still say it, and I am swell, and it's swell to see you. But there are two words one should never use. One of them is swell, and the other one is lousy. And that's when Ethel Mertz on I Love Lucy said, gee, tell me the swell one first. You have an interesting story. I want my audience to get to know you. Some of them already know you. But what do you tell people about yourself? I want to know really how you came to faith.
Well, I used to be in technology. So straight out of university, I was a computer games programmer. I used to make websites and mobile applications and that kind of stuff. I lived in a tech world. And at some point, I realized that I needed to look for a vocation and not a job. Something changed in my early 20s where I thought this superficial life of chasing money and getting drunk and having fun is great, but it's not everything. Surely there's more to life than this. And this started a period of exploration where, well, I think first of all, I was looking to do something more rewarding and to feel contentment rather than happiness, which of course happiness is a state of mind, whereas contentment is a place of being. And that led me into teaching. But what I didn't realize at the time was that teaching was the start of my vocation, but not the whole of it. And I taught in Christian schools and Church of England schools, and I had an encounter with Christ in the Eucharist.
Okay, that right there, I remember you said this last time you were on. This is a really, but it's very beautiful. So here you are. Are you any kind of a believer at that point?
I mean, I'd always believed in God. And I feel like, looking back retrospectively, I can say I had a relationship with the Father, but I didn't know Christ the person. And so I met Christ the person in church. So I was open to the idea, and I'd been searching for a long time without knowing what I was searching for or who I was searching for. I'd been to different types of churches and made friends and had a nice time, but never really experienced anything or had any kind of an encounter until I found my way into a relatively high church, Anglican church, and they had the Eucharist. Their Holy Communion service was the center of their faith. And it spoke to me in a way that nothing else ever had or has since. My whole life since then has been centered on what we call the Mass. And there was a beauty in that liturgy. There was a beauty in that, what I now can describe as the experience with the body and blood of Christ. But at the time, I would have thought, I don't know the theology, I don't know the liturgy, I don't know what's going on, but I know there's a presence here that I love and know that I want to explore more and have in my life. And
that was in the Church of England, in the context of the Church of England.
It was, yes. Pretty much all of the faith out here is Church of England, but it's in different flavors. So, you've got your very low church evangelical, non-liturgical, and you've got your very high church Anglo-Catholic, which is almost the same as Roman Catholic. So there's a broad depth in the Anglican Church, but this was part of that.
This brings us to the state of the Christian faith in the UK. It seems to me that the Muslims have made tremendous inroads in Europe and particularly in France and in England. And then you have secularism, agnosticism, atheism seems to have made great inroads, culturally speaking, over there. So you're a bit of an anomaly swimming against the tide.
Yeah, it's a problem because we've been pushing over here secularism for so long, this idea that we can have a political neutrality and that all faiths are equal, all ideas are equal. Essentially, it's universalism that we've been pushing for so long. But because it has been so prominent in the public square, what's happened is that Christianity has been stripped out. So, for example, in our education system, I went into teaching, and all schools across the land should be, by law, having some kind of Christian worship, some kind of loosely Christian worship every single day.
Bull markets turn everyone into a stock market genius. Bear markets reveal who truly is. If your portfolio isn't hedged, you're gambling. A single market correction could wipe out years of gains. For nearly a decade, my friends at Noble Gold Investments have helped investors diversify by adding gold to their portfolios. Gold may help you preserve your upside potential and limit your downside risk. Visit noblegoldinvestments.com and learn how easy it is to incorporate gold into your investment strategy. noblegoldinvestments.com.
The vast majority of them no longer do, because Christ has been pulled out of the public square, seen as, uncouth or, old-fashioned. And so, of course, we have a vacuum. And as you and I both know, nature abhors a vacuum. And so that void hasn't been filled with, okay, all ideas being equal. It's been filled with one particular idea. Well, potentially two. Wokeism has had a bit of a grasp over here, but of course, wokeism destroys itself. It eats itself.
I didn't hear that. What does?
Wokeism.
Oh, wokeism. Yeah.
If you're woke today, it doesn't mean you're woke tomorrow. J.K. Rowling was held up as a great feminist 5 minutes ago, and now she's a massive transphobe. Woke doesn't work. It doesn't survive. So to fill that void more permanently, Islam has stepped in. And it's becoming a real concern in England at the moment, especially we just had elections, and our mayor of London for a third term, don't ask me why they're allowed 3 terms, this Mohammedan mayor of London has been elected back in on a block vote. And it's gotten to the point now that Brits, this is a statistic truth out of the last census, Brits or Britons are in a minority in our capital city. And the Mohammedans are outvoting us to a point that British people don't have a voice. Did you say the Mohammedans are outvoting us? I love the term Mohammedan. Absolutely. It's an old-fashioned term. The Mohammedans are outvoting. It is interesting because, look, there are different kinds. I mean, when people say the mayor of London is a Muslim, you have to really ask what kind of Muslim. So there are people who are nominally some kind of faith. There's some people who are more seriously some kind of faith. There's some people who are radically some kind of faith. So is his surname Khan? Yes, it is Khan, but I don't actually think it matters how Muslim he is or isn't, because it doesn't matter about his faith in particular. It's the faith of the people that are voting for him, right? So we've looked at the statistics in England, and there isn't actually a block vote for many demographics, in that Christians, whether they're Catholic or Protestant, vote different ways. I might vote Conservative, my Christian neighbor might vote Labour, the left-wing party. The same with the Jews, the same with the Sikhs, the same with the Hindus. But the Mohammedans do tend to vote with one block vote. There is a massive demographic there that all vote one particular way, so that when they see that they have one of their own, so to speak, running, they all vote for that person, regardless of how faithful he is or isn't. It's a real democratic problem, because it means that there's no democratic solution. How is it that that the UK allowed this to happen demographically? To what do you put that down? Yeah, you're absolutely right in that there is a hostility, and it's not even implicit. Some high-profile Mohammedans have come out since the election and said, well, if there are Britons that do not like it, they can go and live elsewhere. It's like, excuse me, come take over our politics, take over our land, and tell us to go elsewhere. But how has it come to happen? Well, it has come to happen through our wetness, our lukewarmness, and our misunderstanding of what it means to be Christian. We have and always have been a Christian nation in England, and for the longest time, that meant spreading the gospel. And of course, the British Empire was one of the greatest empires in human history. We spread hospitals, charities, education, schools. We spread railways. We spread education, as in passing the knowledge of the truth of the gospel around the world. And then we forgot that. We lost that confidence. And I think it happened over the two world wars, in that we're no longer an empire now. And so we're confused about our place in the world. And therefore, we're also confused about what we're supposed to be doing. And so we've stopped spreading the gospel. And instead, we're spreading this new message of tolerance and liberalism. And again, back to universalism, this idea that we should welcome all ideas, welcome all cultures, welcome all faiths. And actually, that's not helpful, because if we truly believe that there is one truth, and that truth is Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, and he offers us eternal salvation, and he is the only way to heaven, then if we love these so-called people that we're saying we love, and we want them to worship whatever they want. If we truly love them, we'd want them to get into heaven too. Therefore, we want them to know Jesus Christ too. So it's not good enough to say it's a nice thing to let people worship Muhammad or follow Muhammad. It's not a nice thing at all. It's leading souls to damnation. But we've lost our Christian identity.
Well, it's one thing to have religious toleration, but this is going well beyond that. I guess some people have called it a lack of cultural confidence. And it seems to me that happened in England. According to Peter Hitchens, whom I've interviewed on the subject, he wrote a great book called The Rage Against God. He puts it down to what happened as a result of World War I, that somehow England lost its way after World War I.
Absolutely, we did. And it's because we lost our identity as a nation, and our identity as a nation was rooted in our identity in Christ. And without one or the other, we don't know where we are. We've spent the last half a century looking to America to be our big brothers and lead the way and tell us where to go and who to fight and what to do as a big brother in the playground, so to speak, and also to handle some of our battles for us. But that's not good enough for a self-sufficient nation. We need to be stronger. And you can look at that manifest in many ways. One example is that we no longer patrol our borders. Our borders are open. People come over in dinghies from France every day. We get thousands of people crossing our borders every year illegally, and we do nothing about it other than give them a hotel, a cell phone, give them clothes and comforts and luxuries, as well as state benefits and housing and free healthcare. We don't say, actually, we've got to protect our borders. We've got to protect our nation. Otherwise, there's no point of having a nation. We don't say we've got to look after our veterans who are on the streets, homeless first, before we look elsewhere. We don't say, let's look at the people that we're taking in. Yes, it's good to help refugees, but the refugees in southern Sudan, northern Nigeria, Artsakh, China, who are Christians, who are being persecuted, who share our values, who share our faith, let's get them in, rather than importing people who hate our culture, hate our values, and want to see the end of our way of life. We've got a real conflict of ideologies. And I do think a lot of this comes, we were talking about tolerance before, a lot of this comes to tolerance. The Christian faith says we should not tolerate evil. And, throwing homosexuals off of roofs or oppressing women that they can't drive, can't be educated, or must cover themselves in all but the niqab is what we would class as evil. None of it is good, yet we've tolerated it for far too long, to the point that it's become normalized and accepted.
Well, and it goes back to the idea that one has to know who one is and what one believes. If we don't, we're open to anything. And that's really, we have this dramatically here in the United States at this point among the cultural elites. In the heartland, you don't see that very much, but among the cultural elites, they have a kind of hand-wringing guilt somehow. They don't know exactly about what they're guilty, but they feel guilty, and they think, well, the least we can do is let others do whatever they want to do. It really is. Actually, it reminds me of what Angela Merkel did in Germany. It struck me that the fathomless guilt from the genuine xenophobia and evil of the Holocaust, that led her to let in 1 million strangers into Germany, as though that somehow might atone, at least partially, for what Germany did. And I thought to myself, it's utterly misplaced. It's absolutely misplaced. Just as the kind of tolerance you're talking about, it's misplaced. It's like giving something to someone who will use what you've given them to take advantage of you. They don't say thank you very much. On the contrary, they say, what a sucker. How naive. I will take advantage of this sucker, and I will be in your house. I will throw you out of your house, effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing this across the continent. You are absolutely right. In France, we're seeing 70% of rapes are from these new illegal immigrants that have been swept in. We're seeing in the United Kingdom, we have a vast swathe of what we call Pakistani Muslim grooming gangs, but they're not grooming gangs. They are essentially rape gangs who are taking young British girls, young working class white girls, and grooming and raping them. And it's been covered up by the system because nobody wants to be seen as racist or xenophobic. So no one wants to address the massive problem that we're importing, that people don't actually share our sets of values, which means that actually not all ideas are equal. We have to say, look, if we're going to have immigration, that's a conversation to be had. But if we are going to have immigration, we have to make sure that people are integrating into one community, that we're all together in one society that shares a set of values. Otherwise, it crumbles, it falls apart. Multiculturalism does not work. That's not to say that multi-ethnicity can't work. And there is a nuance there that people aren't willing to engage in.
Well, here's a simple question. How do you pronounce the name of the town in which Christ Church, where you are minister in charge, exists?
Harlesden. It's in northwest London, a place called Harlesden.
Harlesden.
Yeah, we do soft R's over here.
Harlesden.
Minister, you guys would say Harlesden.
We'd say Harlesden. Harlesden. I'm going to Harlesden. Harlesden. So how should an American say? Harlesden, I guess. Harlesden. I'm going to Harlesden. You're a minister in charge at Christ Church there. So you are in the Anglican Church, but somehow affiliated with the so-called Old Catholic Church. Help me understand that, because that's confusing to me.
I'm trying to understand it myself. It's all very complicated. But essentially, I have Catholic orders, which means that my apostolic succession is recognized by all the denominations, including Rome, which is very rare. They only recognize the Eastern Orthodox and Old Catholics. So that I'm a validly ordained priest, but I serve in an Anglican parish. And Anglicanism is the tradition that I came up in. So it's a patrimony that I'm very familiar with. And I think there's a lot of beauty in there, such as the Cranmerian language, the these, thous, thems, but also that whole heritage of English small c Catholicism that's very important to us. And so that's where I serve.
You just used an adjective to describe some kind of language. And I asked you on the break, what was that adjective? And you said?
Cranmerian, from Thomas Cranmer.
Cranmerian, as if anyone in my audience would understand Cranmerian.
Oh, I bet they do.
Cranmerian. So yes, Thomas Cranmer, who wrote the prayer book. And when did he do that? I don't know.
The Book of Common Prayer, so the original one was in 1549, but the most common one is from 1662. But people will know Cranmerian English because it's the old modern English. It's the oldest form of modern English. So it's not medieval English. It's not old English. It is modern English, but it's the oldest form of it from the King James Bible. So anyone that knows the King James Bible knows that form.
A lot of people, when they refer to Shakespearean English, they say, oh, that's old English. No. That is modern English, folks. Shakespeare, King James Bible, 1600 is modern English. Chaucer is Middle English. Old English is Beowulf, which is 1,000 years ago, impossible to understand, very difficult to understand. But Cranmerian, of course, refers, you said, to Thomas Cranmer, and that is, it is beautiful. Much of it is very, very beautiful. Well, so where you are now, you do a lot of commentary on politics. A lot of the things that we're talking about here, you talk about publicly. It seems to me that in England, as in America, the folks in the heartland, the good people of the nation would agree with you, but they're not represented by their cultural elites. I remember I was in Newcastle on Tyne about 15 or 16 years ago, wandering around, and I went into a big, beautiful old church. And I don't remember who I was with, but we knelt and prayed. And the vicar came and spoke to us, and he had tears in his eyes. He said he could not remember anyone coming in and praying, that many people come in to look at the architecture. But to some extent, England has been dramatically secularized. A lot of the churches are no longer functioning as churches. What gives you hope? What do you see?
In that regard, not a lot, but I will get to the hope. In that regard, I think the problem is that the church has tried to chase the times. And of course, the church will always be behind the times by 10 or 20 years. So it always appears old fashioned. What the church should have done is stuck to the scriptures and said, the scriptures are immovable. The faith is immovable. Therefore, the church is immovable. Come here for something different to the degeneracy, the indecency that you see around you. There is something good. There is something better. That's where you can find Jesus Christ in the church. However, it didn't do that. So the church has become woke. The Church of England has very few years left in it, if you ask me. But where do I find hope? Larger than that. So the Church of England is just an institution. It's just a part of the big C church, right? And England itself is just an institution. England may fall. Greater empires have risen and fallen throughout history. The West itself may fall. But whatever comes from that has to be a new form of Christendom. It has to be centered on Christ as the cornerstone. And I believe that Orthodox Christians across denominations are coming together at this moment in time as a remnant to rekindle the flame of the faith where it's become lukewarm and secularized and liberalized. There is a remnant of orthodoxy that's saying we must protect the faith, proclaim the faith, because society is crumbling around us. We have to be here to bring it back.
It's interesting, so many people, usually converts to the Catholic Church, like the late Walter Hooper, whom I've interviewed a few times, and Father Michael Ward, they postulate that C.S. Lewis, had he lived, would have become Roman Catholic. I don't think so. I'm almost sure he would have become a Pentecostal. But it's interesting because this drift away from the actual faith has been happening for a very, very long time. And what you don't seem to have in the UK, which we have here in the United States, is what I would call a holy remnant of evangelicals that are right on theologically. In other words, it seems to me that a lot of what might be described as the evangelical church in England has gone woke.
Yeah, you're right. And I want to address that point on C.S. Lewis, because C.S. Lewis was converted to the Christian faith by J.R. Tolkien, right? And Tolkien is obviously a Catholic, and they were good friends. The Inklings together were good friends, writing together, praying together. If C.S. Lewis wanted to convert to Rome, if he wanted to swing the tide back, he would have. I think it's very condescending of Roman Catholics to say, oh, given enough time, he would have converted. No, he was one of the greatest theologians of the modern era. C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity is a beautiful book for Catholics, evangelicals, Protestants alike. There's a beauty in that depth of we're just Christian. Our focus first and foremost is on Christ. Denominations are less important. So I respect him dearly for that, and I don't think it's fair for them to say he would have converted. But in terms of England and the church in England, yeah, you're right, the evangelicals have massively gone woke, and the ones that haven't, they've gone quiet. They think we can just keep our heads down. We'll just get on with what we're doing in our little corner of the church over here. And it's not good enough. It really isn't. When there's apostasy, heresy, error, liberalism, left, right, and center, we need people to stand firm in the faith, to boldly proclaim the faith, to remember the Great Commission. It's not good enough to be selfish and focus on your own inward trajectory. The faith is for everyone.
I wrote a book which addresses much of what you've just said, called Letter to the American Church. And some of my friends in London last summer were saying, we'd like to do an English version of this. And I immediately thought that Calvin Robinson, whom I had not yet met, ought to write an introduction or a foreword to it, because we're talking about the same kinds of things. If you keep your head down and don't confront this, you're complicit with evil. There's just no way around it. And I think it's interesting to me that the difference between England and the United States is that England is an officially Christian nation. We here are not. We don't have an official religion. But it's interesting how King Charles doesn't seem to be a heroic defender of the faith. His coronation it had these woke elements. It had different members of different faiths standing around. I thought it was very strange.
It did, but I'm quite a bit more optimistic about the coronation. I think at least it was an explicitly Christian service. It was one of the most watched Christian services in history. Over 20 million people watched the coronation. I mean, how often do we get an opportunity like that to proclaim the gospel?
That's interesting. I mean, I guess I'm glad to hear that you have that view of it.
I loved it. There was an anointing, a reminder that the king serves the people, but the king is accountable to God. So the king is not the ultimate authority in this land even. There was a Holy Communion service as part of it. And of course, there were readings from the epistles and there was reading from the gospel as well. And I think so many eyes were tuned into that service. And that's a very rare occurrence. I think other than the conclave of a new pope or Her Majesty the Queen's funeral, I think the coronation was probably the third most watched Christian service in modern history. And that we have to be thankful for.
Well, that is extraordinary that the roots are still there. Father Calvin Robinson, really a joy to catch up with you. I will be in London this summer. I hope I can see you in person. God bless you. Thanks for being with us.
Fantastic. God bless you too. See you soon.